It remains the West's most tragic episode of the wrong people in the wrong place at the wrong time. Just days after the declaration of martial law, an immigrant company of 150 men, women, and children entered the Utah Territory. They were led by the Baker and Fancher families. They insisted on crossing the territory, north to south, to take the warm weather route to California.
They were a combination of Missourians and Arkansas people. And that was one more red flag for the Mormons, because the Missourians had driven the Mormons out of their state at a great loss of property and as well as life. Just before the Fancher train arrived in Salt Lake City, the Mormons in Salt Lake City received word that Mormon apostle Parley P. Pratt had been murdered by an Arkansas man in Arkansas. And so you have two states which in Mormon mind represented people who hated the Mormons and who had murdered the Mormons, now represented in this wagon train.
The Baker-Fancher party, footsore, hungry, was denied food and supplies under the martial law decrees of Brigham Young.
He then gives notice that no one is to trade with non-Mormons up and down the line. Save your harvest. Don't trade. We need it all. Tough times are ahead.
As the company moved through the territory towards the southern settlements, they lashed out at the Mormons.
And even boasted that once they got to California, they had been treated so poorly by the Mormons as they were coming through the Utah area. They said, when we get to California, we're going to urge that they attack you from the California side, too.
War councils were held in the Mormon settlements of Parowan and Cedar City. The Baker-Fancher party was viewed as a threat. A decision was made, and a writer was sent to inform Brigham Young. In the first week of September, the Baker-Fancher party had pulled into a high pasture along the old Spanish Trail. It was called simply the Mountain Meadows, and it had been a favorite resting spot of Parley Pratt when he traveled the area. On September 7th, the camp was fired on by Indians and militiamen disguised as Indians. The siege lasted for 4 days. Then, representatives of the Mormon communities came forward with a white flag of truce, saying the Indian attack could be called off if the company would surrender their weapons, leave their possessions, and simply walk away. 17 small children were placed in a wagon. The wounded immigrants were placed in another. Then walked the women, and then the men in single-file lines. Armed militiamen were on either side. A mile outside of the camp, a signal was given. Within minutes, the only survivors of the Baker-Fancher party were the children. More than 100 people, including the wounded laying in the wagons, were dead. The next day, a rider barreled into Cedar City with an urgent message from Brigham Young.
Go with all speed. Spare no horseflesh. The emigrants must not be meddled with. If it takes all Iron County to prevent it, they must go free and unmolested. Brigham Young.
Isaac Haight, one of the leading figures of southern Utah, reportedly broke into tears.
Too late. Too late.
Years later, John D. Lee, facing trial for what became known as the Mountain Meadows Massacre, talked of the oath that bound those who had been on the killing field.
From that day, this has been the understanding with all concerned in that massacre, that the man who divulged the secret should die. He was to be killed wherever he was found, for treason to the men who killed the immigrants and for his treason to the church. The orders to lay it on the Indians were just as positive as they were to keep it all secret. John D. Lee.
The story of an Indian massacre never held. Within weeks, the California press was demanding vengeance.
What effect the news of the Mountain Meadows massacre will have at Washington, it is hard to foresee. But we much mistake the character of President Buchanan and his cabinet if it does not lead speedily to such action as will cause that arch-traitor, Brigham Young, to repent of his temerity. The blood of American citizens cries for vengeance from the barren sands of the Great Basin. The San Francisco Bulletin.
It was a time of war hysteria, when the wrong people came to the wrong place at the wrong time, and few would ever doubt that the wrong thing happened.